Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. With us, we have a very special guest, and I would think that back in previous years, it wasn't as important to start talking about a race or a campaign or issues leading into a race as far into it as we are. But we are this year because this is for 2018. We're talking about the governor's race in the state of Connecticut. And with me, I had the pleasure of having Dan Drew, current mayor of Middletown, who's got a very interesting narrative to tell. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It is great to be here with you and your viewers.
First of all, tell me who you are, where you came from, and what brought you to this place.
Well, it's great to be with you here in Danbury. I grew up in New Milford, so just a hair north of here. And it was a wonderful town to grow up in. And my wife and I settled down in Middletown after college. I've been mayor for halfway through my third term now. So I've been here for 6 years. And Middletown is in great shape. We're doing very well. And I just very recently launched a candidacy for governor, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Excellent. Where's your background further before that? You mentioned you're from New Milford. Have you lived in Connecticut your entire life?
No, I was born in New York City in the Bronx at Albert Einstein Hospital, and we lived in New York until I was 10, and we moved to New Milford when I was 10 years old, and I spent the rest of my childhood in New Milford. I got my bachelor's degree from UConn, my master's from Columbia. I have 4 kids. I have a 12-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy, and a 20-month-old baby girl.
My good friend Henry Pietras, who's in the audience today, he paid a lot of attention when he found out to the fact that you've actually donated a kidney to a person that you don't know.
Well, I know her now.
Yes, the connection, I guess, is very strong now.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So there's a woman named Olivia in Middletown who had polycystic kidney disease and was looking for a kidney, so she didn't need to go on dialysis, which, as you know, is very difficult and unpleasant and not the best thing out there. You know, living organ donation is the best way for a patient with kidney disease to become healthy again. And she put out a call to the public looking for someone with O blood to get tested. So I got tested last summer, and I actually went through the testing in July of 2016 at Yale, and turned out I was a perfect match for her, spot on. We have the same blood type. And then they do additional tests called tissue typing, and then there's another test. I can't even remember what it's called. There's a multitude of tests you go through, and you have to match up in a number of realms, and we did. And our surgery was on August 25th. So I underwent the nephrectomy, and I had my left kidney taken out, and she's got it now, and she's doing great.
That's a pretty amazing story. In terms of Middletown. You've been mayor of Middletown for 6 years now.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Middletown to move to, and what have you found to be, what were the needs of Middletown when you arrived?
So Middletown's a beautiful place. It's got a great main street, nice school system, a lot of diversity. It's got the Connecticut River. It's off of 2 major highways. There's so much going on there. So, you know, my wife and I were looking for a place to settle down. It just clicked for us. It just made sense, and it's probably the best way that I could explain it, because you know how sometimes in life you make a decision, and a lot of times that decision is rational and you can explain exactly what you're thinking, and then sometimes there's just gut level comfort, and we had gut level comfort with it. We just liked it.
It just comes from the heart sometimes.
Yeah, it just fit for us. So we lived there for a while. I ran for mayor in 2009, came very close, got within a hair of winning, and came back 2 years later against the incumbent Republican mayor, and ended up winning that election. On the day I took office, our bond rating was AA. It's now AAA. Had been upgraded to AA+, and then to AAA. We've had the lowest interest rates in the city's history. Unemployment has been cut nearly in half since the day I took office. Hundreds of new small businesses open. FedEx Ground is building a major Northeast Regional Distribution Center in Middletown, and they're using Connecticut union construction workers to build it. Violent crime is down 18%. We have done a lot of work with our police department. We've added police on the streets. We've removed officers who were not doing the right thing. We've added more firefighters. We have a great school system. We've funded our public schools and our infrastructure. We have road bonds in process. We have a $34 million parks project that we're doing right now. We're rebuilding our sewer system. to open up and redevelop our waterfront. We've been recognized nationally as one of the most romantic cities in the country. Great place to do business. We have people coming in from all over the country all the time looking to do different projects with us. We've added retail downtown. We've been environmental leaders. We've banned fracking waste. We've banned the use of pesticides on in our public parks. We implemented a forest management initiative. We solarized a number of city buildings. We created an organic public farm, CSA, crop sharing CSA, on public land, and we did it with community input. And we've just got a lot of good stuff going on.
You mentioned the town banned fracking. Is that the actual fracking or the transportation of fracking waste?
We ban the storage of fracking waste.
Okay.
And process it.
Okay. Okay. Now that's a pretty big thing in Connecticut right now, because I think we're up to about 21 towns that have banned fracking waste from coming into their towns, and the legislature so far hasn't acted on that. Well, they had a temporary halt on fracking, and I think that that moratorium is probably passed by now, so we have to either reinstitute it or extend it. But to see something on a local level with your town and with other towns that have taken action on their own, now waited for the legislature to act for the entire state. Mm-hmm. That's very grassroots. That's getting right to the heart of the matter, and sending a message to the legislature of the needs of all those towns that have already passed those fracking waste ban. And what about the downtown in Middletown, and was so appealing to a company like FedEx?
So our downtown is in great shape. We have like a mini tech boom going on. And what we find is concentrating on quality of life and giving the companies especially companies in the high tech field, but any that are downtown, the ability to offer some quality of life to their employees helps them retain employees. And what we found is that's made us an incredibly attractive destination for a lot of companies who want to come in downtown. So we've recently had multiple high-tech companies in aerospace and IT locating not just in Middletown, but in downtown Middletown. We have restaurants, we have retail, we have, as I said, one of the most walkable cities in Connecticut. It's the widest main street in Connecticut. It's walkable to our waterfront, to Wesleyan University. We've gotten Wesleyan put their bookstore downtown in conjunction with R.J. Julia, which is a very well-regarded independent bookseller. We have worked with a developer to build downtown market rate housing, which is the first time that's ever come in downtown Middletown. And we've actually been experiencing, like I said, a mini tech boom as a result. We have companies coming in from all over the place, bringing in high-paying jobs and high-paying people into the downtown, which is just feeding this success, because now we have all these people downtown earning living wages and spending their money downtown at the jewelry stores, at the toy store, at the restaurants, at the bookstore, walking up and down. It's just a vibrant, electric place. You can't go there on a Friday or Saturday night or a Thursday night and find a parking space easily.
So outside of work, people are still staying downtown. When work is done, they're still hanging around downtown and finding entertainment down there. And of course, Wesleyan is a highly renowned university nationwide. Mm-hmm. So you've got a nice basis down there. We do, and it's going really well. Wesleyan's wonderful. Actually, I taught at Wesleyan this past semester. It was my first collegiate teaching experience. Actually, my first teaching experience ever. But it was a great experience for me. And Wesleyan's, it's part of the fabric of the community. What did you teach?
I taught group dynamics and organizational psychology, but applied to politics. It's normally a field that's where my graduate degree is in, and it's normally a field that is used in business consulting and understanding the inner workings of organizations from a psychological standpoint. Just took the behavioral models and applied them to politics.
That seems like a very nice blend for what's traditionally a liberal arts college to combine the liberal arts and the real world kind of things, which is, I guess, what liberal arts is, in fact, to find a model to apply to real life.
Sure.
But so you came in 6 years ago, and you mentioned some of the things you've done, and that the city is on a good track financially. Mm-hmm. More specifics about that.
Well, we have focused very strongly on small business growth and small business development. We've been very labor friendly, And the guiding principle for me is whatever decision I have before me, it's got to be the best decision for the greatest number of people. And if I can answer yes to that question, then we'll do something. And if I can't answer yes, then we won't do something. So it all boils down to a pretty simple formulation. Is this good for the greatest number of Middletown residents as it can possibly be? And when the answer is yes, we move ahead. And that means that we're empowering other people. We're empowering people to be prosperous and to come up with ideas and to do things that are good for the community. We're giving everybody a piece of it and everybody a stake of it. And it's worked really well.
Okay, we live in a world which is, unfortunately, a lot of it is us and them. A lot of it is take sides with one side or the other side. How do you balance taking care of the needs of business and taking care of the needs of employees at the same time? How do you find that balance?
Well, I think you have to recognize first that your job as a government official is to make sure that the people are doing well. And one of the things that bothers me, one of the reasons I'm running, is because I think we've taken the idea that we have to do what we can for business and the elites too far in this country. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't help. It's not to say that we shouldn't be there. But we should be there reasonably and responsibly, which means that right now in this country and in this state to a large degree, we have socialism for the rich and for corporations, and everybody else has you're on your own.
Yeah.
And that's how it's worked here for 40 years. And since the Reagan years in this country, there's been this lionization of business and the wealthy. And the whole idea is that if they're doing well, the rest of us are doing well. We have to do what we can for them at all costs. And there are a lot of times, developers, business people will bring projects to the city, and there'll be projects that aren't good for us in the long run. And it's never getting to the paper, but I'll say no, or I won't work with them, or I'll say, obviously, do what you're going to do on your own, but we're not going to be involved in this in any way. And a lot of times, I think a lot of elected officials don't do that because if they can get out in public and say, I created X number of jobs, if they're not good jobs or they're not the process isn't good for the community, then all it is a soundbite. It doesn't mean anything in people's lives. You have to do what works in people's lives. And most business people out there, I find, are not looking for any special handouts. They're not looking for anything ridiculous. They want to be prosperous and they want an opportunity to succeed. And that means that they need the right workforce, they need the right opportunity, they need the right environment. That's the way government can be really helpful. Developing a workforce that's going to work for where businesses are growing into the next generation. That's one of the biggest things that the state of Connecticut can do much better than it's doing now. And part of the problem is, right now we're cutting VOTEC schools, we're cutting community colleges, we're cutting the four-year university system. I want to make public higher education free, and I want to reinvest in VOTEC and community colleges, because that will help us create the workforce of tomorrow. And if we have the workforce of tomorrow, then companies are going to come here and stay here, and we're not going to have to bribe them to stay here or to come here with gigantic corporate subsidies, which is what the state's doing right now. The State Bond Commission, which has several constitutional officers on it and several members of the legislature, unanimously has voted for hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate welfare.
Giveaways.
Giveaways, total giveaways. UBS, the Swiss bank, which left Connecticut, got $20 million. They left after their payback period expired. Several companies that are subsidiaries of General Electric, or were at the time they got their money, got the money, and then GE bolted anyway. And this is the big lie, right? This is the big lie we've been living with forever, that corporate welfare and trickle-down economics and help for the wealthiest, most elite people out there will make the rest of us prosperous. It's ridiculous, and our experience hasn't borne it out. So we need to think differently, and that means taking care of people and the economy from the ground up rather than from the top down.
It seems like that's been the mindset, not just in Connecticut, but nationwide, that you have to bribe a company, that states compete against one another for the right to have a company come to them, and they pay them large amounts of money, tax breaks, and et cetera, for a period of time. And the day after that period of time ends, they're gone. They're looking to another state to give them more money to transfer their entire operations to there. And with the notion that Connecticut's taxes are too high, how does that fit in with the fact that GE went to Massachusetts, where taxes are higher. Where Aetna went to New York City, where taxes are higher. How does that jibe, or does it?
It doesn't. It's a lie. The reason those companies left is because they were looking for a dynamic workforce that existed in a dynamic place. And that's what we have to do a better job of developing here. New York has paid family leave. They have a $15 minimum wage. Massachusetts has a unitary reporting tax, which is a fancy word for saying that they've closed the ability of companies that are based in Mass to offshore profits somewhere else. Ironically, when we were considering doing that, that's the very thing GE said was causing them to think about leaving. Of course, we found out later that GE was already well underway looking, and that they had intended to leave, and that was a smokescreen. GE and Aetna didn't leave because of taxes. In fact, Connecticut has one of the lowest effective corporate tax rates in the entire country. And with all of the different incentive programs we have, and with the amount of money the state doles out to these companies, has an incredibly business-friendly environment. The problem we have is that we forsake the middle class, and we don't help to develop our larger workforce writ large. So when these companies are looking for young, dynamic workers, they're having a hard time finding them in Connecticut, in part because it's too expensive for young people to live here, and that's caused by a number of factors. They come out of school with huge debt. They can't afford homes, and the jobs that exist here aren't enough for them. So they go to big cities where there are amenities that Middletown has, and that a lot of these bigger cities have. And that's part of what's attracting those companies to those places. So if we can create a bigger and more skilled workforce here in the long run and keep people in our state, then we're going to be in a much stronger position.
Take us back to, we talk about the financial crisis that Connecticut's in right now. Take us back to, let's take us back as far as Lowell Weicker, when Lowell Weicker was governor. And the state income tax was instituted in order to take care of the deficit curve we were on in terms of the state of the pension funds. How did that play out in your mind's eye?
Well, I think having a progressive income tax is a good thing. I think it needs to be more progressive, though. And one of the problems we've had in the last several years is, as there have been the tax increases of the past few years, the middle class bore a greater share of the burden than the wealthy did. And people say all the time, if you ask the wealthy to pay their fair share, that they're going to bolt for Florida or some other low-tax state. That's a canard. It doesn't happen. And in fact, you hear people saying, how many times have you heard on the news recently, the wealthy are fleeing Connecticut, there's this exodus of people from Connecticut?
Yeah, and on and on and on and on.
It's not true.
Ad nauseum, I know.
But it's literally not true. There are more billionaires in Connecticut today, billionaires with a B, than there were in 2011. Some have left, but they've been replaced by others. There are more millionaires. Home sales in Lower Fairfield County are happening at a higher volume than they have in years, and the prices for those homes are up. So the idea that the rich are having a hard time in Connecticut is not true. And there's so many fear-based arguments that are used to scare us into preserving the status quo on behalf of other people who don't need it, that we end up fighting with each other. We end up tearing each other apart to fight for the scraps of what's left over, and we don't even realize that we're doing the dirty work of the most elite people out there, because they don't want to acknowledge that they're doing great. Because if they did, then the rest of us would realize that we've been played this whole time.
It does seem likely that that the wealthy, contrary to what's said on their behalf, don't mind paying taxes in order to live in a great state, in the greatest country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and have the opportunity to become wealthy or wealthier. During my childhood, that was during the Eisenhower administration, the top tax rate was, I'm going to say 90%. That was about what it was. Now, of course, you had write-offs and deductions to bring that down, but the tax rate was much higher than it is now, and yet the wealthy understood that was a small price to pay for the opportunity that living in America had given them. So again, take us back to Weicker and the income tax coming into play, and bring us forward from there, administration, or year by year, if you will.
Well, one of the problems Connecticut's had is that for many, many, many years, and I think this largely falls to John Rowland as the responsible party, is that Connecticut made a lot of promises and didn't pay to fund them as it went along. And now the bill's coming due, and we're paying for it now. So this is another myth you hear. You hear all the time that state employees are bankrupting us, and that's not true either. The state employees that work for the state of Connecticut have given back a ton and have taken a lot of hits in concessions, including recently. What happened for a long time is that the state of Connecticut made a lot of promises and just didn't fund the trusts that were supposed to pay for those promises in the long run. So we're playing catch up in many regards for the liabilities that the state incurred over the course of many, many, many years.
What I'm gathering from some other people, and that, you know, you've been to our Democracy for America meetings, is that when Weicker was governor, when Low Weicker was governor, he brought in the income tax in order to stop that excessive curve of pension fundings. We were heading into a very harsh deficit situation, and the state income tax put us on a level plane to level that out. And then Governor Rowland came in, and along with the legislature, which might have been Democratic, but we had surpluses every year, and yet they wanted to, I guess, add a little extra onto that by reducing the amount of those payments, which put us right back into that steep curve again, and that helped bring us to where we are now. And what can bring us out of that?
I think a higher income tax on the wealthiest people in our state. I think legalizing and taxing recreational marijuana and regulating it like we regulate alcohol. I think we need to have tolls in Connecticut, and I think the reason is that right now our taxes are subsidizing drivers and truckers from other states. So I think we need those three revenue options right now, and I think we need to reform some of the way our state and local governments work because the way our local governments work because they're vastly more expensive than they should be, and they're funded by a regressive local property tax, and that disproportionately impacts working class people.
With education, is our formula working? Our formula of giving small amounts of state taxes back to municipalities according to their needs, or is there a better way to fund education?
No, the formula is not working the way it is. The bigger problem is not just the formula, it's the way we think about education. First of all, the state of Connecticut right now puts way too much money, in my opinion, into charter schools. Many of these charter schools are run by for-profit corporations, and it detracts from the ability of the state to help subsidize local school districts. There are a few other problems we have in education. One is that the laws governing the relationship between cities and their boards of ed are antiquated and give, in my opinion, way too much power to school administrators who pay themselves very handsomely and then have the ability to withhold money from students and teachers if they don't get what they want. They can basically hold public money hostage, and I've seen it happen in cities and towns all over the state over and over and over again, and that's how you end up with superintendents with salaries in the neighborhood of $250,000 a year, while students are suffering in those districts and supplies are withheld from classrooms. And my dad's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, so I've seen this in a lot of different places around the state. And then the biggest problem you have in schools is that we have to recognize that poverty is a huge contributor to a student's ability to learn or not. And the factors that a student is dealing with at home has a huge effect on what that student is learning in school and that student's ability to learn. Is that kid coming from a home that's literate? Is that kid coming from a home where English is spoken regularly? Is there domestic violence? Are there major financial issues? Is the kid eating in the morning? Are there mental health challenges? There are a multitude of variables that affect a kid's education, and these things are very present in a lot of urban school districts, and that you can't fix the school systems in those places unless you address those wider issues.
I have a background in education, and let me throw this thought by you, because it seems to be that the trend nowadays in education is toward the basics, not only toward testing, much too much testing, people seem to be complaining that there is, but that's putting too much emphasis on the basics rather than on the higher-minded kinds of things, art, phys ed, music, things of that nature. And the thought that's occurred to me is that if instead of teaching toward the basics, but have more high-minded art, science, things of that nature, to inspire kids to want to learn those things, to be a scientist, to be any of a number of things, and then look back and say, oh, well, I think I'd better learn the basics, otherwise I won't be able to be good at what I really am interested in. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think you have to do everything. I think students need to learn all of it. And if you think about it, mm-hmm. what are we trying to get our students to be able to do by the time they graduate from high school? We want them to be able to think critically.
Yes.
We want them to be able to master all of the skills in science and math, in language arts, in history. We want them to understand Shakespeare. We want them to understand music. We want them to know the context of the Renaissance. What motivated Renaissance painters? Why are there particular themes running through all the Renaissance artwork? Why did Impressionists arise? These are the things that students should be able to answer, even if they don't become experts in any one particular field. And so, let me use the example of the Impressionists. Art mm-hmm. is history. You can't understand Impressionism without understanding 19th century France. You can't understand music without understanding mathematics, because what is music at its core? It's math.
Absolutely.
So these things are all important, and none of them can be forsaken. And one of the problems is, right now, we've so overprescribed our public school systems with data requirements for teachers, and with telling teachers not just what to do, but exactly how to do it. That
to learn about the things that brought us as a culture, as humanity, to learn about the things that brought us to where we are now, it seems, is what you're getting at. We're going to come back and do a second show. It's been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Dan Drew, candidate for governor of the state of Connecticut in 2018. See you again in a few minutes.
All right, thank you.